A single act of kindness by a struggling waitress changes not just a boy's life, but her own forever. Emily had been working at the small roadside diner for as long as she could remember. And some days, it felt like the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. The diner was modest, with flickering neon lights outside and a bell on the door that jingled every time a customer entered. Inside, the smell of frying food mixed with coffee and the faint scent of cleaning supplies. Emily moved quickly between tables, carrying trays of food, with a careful balance that came from years of practice. Her uniform was simpler, faded apron over her shirt, but she wore it with pride because it was the symbol of her effort, her hard work, and her determination to keep going no matter how difficult life became. Every day. She worked long hours, starting early in the morning and finishing late at night. Tips were inconsistent. Some days, she barely made enough to cover her bus fare, let alone her rent or groceries. Bills piled up on the counter at home, unopened because she didn't want to see the full amount she owed. Sometimes she felt invisible, like no one noticed the small sacrifices she made every day. The hours spent on her feet, or the little smiles she gave to customers who didn't always appreciate them. But Emily had a heart that refused to harden, a heart that believed that small acts of kindness still mattered, even in a world that often felt cold and unfair. It was a particularly cold evening. With wind whipping down the street and leaves skittering across the sidewalk, Emily had just finished wiping down the tables after a busy lunch rush and was taking a short break. Near the window, when she noticed a boy outside. He looked no older than 12 or 13, his clothes ragged and thin, and his hair sticking up in all directions. He had been standing there for a few minutes, staring through the window at the people enjoying their meals. There was a certain hesitation in his posture, a quiet desperation, as if he wanted something but didn't believe he deserved it. Emily felt a tug at her heart. It's a familiar feeling she had experienced before whenever she saw someone in need. The boy's eyes were drawn to the food on the tables, and Emily could see the longing in his gaze. He didn't say anything, didn't knock on the door, and yet Emily understood instantly what he wanted. She could almost imagine what it felt like for him to be out there in the cold, hungry and alone, searching for a way to survive. Without thinking twice, Emily moved back to the counter, grabbed a hot plate she had just prepared for a customer, and wrapped it carefully in a clean napkin. She picked up a cup of warm soup and a piece of bread and quietly stepped outside, careful not to draw attention. The boy looked up at her, surprise and cautious hope in his eyes. Emily smiled gently and handed him the food. "Here, this is for you," she said softly. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if this was real, unsure if someone could really care enough to do something like this for him. Then, slowly he took the plate, his hands trembling slightly, and whispered a quiet "thank you." Emily nodded, feeling a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the cold evening air. She didn't ask for his name. She didn't demand anything in return. She simply wanted to make sure he had a hot meal and knew that someone saw him, that someone cared. After giving him the food, Emily went back inside, wiped her hands on her apron, and returned to her work. It was a small act, barely noticeable in the grand scheme of the busy diner, but for the boy, it meant the world. As he sat down on the curb to eat, Emily glanced out the window again and felt a strange sense of peace, even as her own problems loomed large in the background. She thought about her own struggles. It's about the bills waiting at home and the constant worry about making ends meet. Yet for a moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that she had been able to offer kindness without hesitation, without expectation, and without judgment. Other customers were chatting, laughing, and focused on their own lives. Unaware of the small scene unfolding outside the window, Emily didn't need recognition or praise. The act itself was enough. She moved through the rest of her shift with a little more energy, her heart lighter despite the fatigue in her body. That night, when she finally walked home under the dim streetlights, she thought about the boy and hoped that someone else somewhere would continue to look out for him if she couldn't always be there. Even though Emily's life was full of struggles, moments like these reminded her why she kept going, why she refused to give up, and why she believed that even the smallest gestures could make a difference. As Emily settled into bed that night, exhausted but quietly satisfied, she reflected on the small miracles that happen every day, the ones no one sees. The ones that don't make the news, but the ones that quietly change lives. She didn't know it then, but this simple act of feeding a hungry boy without asking anything in return would set in motion a chain of events that neither she nor the boy could have imagined. In her heart, she simply knew that kindness, no matter how small, was always worth it. Daniel Carter had been sitting quietly in the corner of the diner for nearly an hour, observing without drawing attention to himself. He was a man used to seeing the world through a lens of numbers, deals, and careful calculations. But that evening, he found himself captivated not by stock reports or business strategies, but by something much simpler and yet much rarer: genuine kindness. He had noticed Emily the moment she had stepped out to hand the boy his meal. Most people would have looked away or worried about losing a customer. Others might have offered something small, but only with the expectation of recognition or reward. Emily did none of that. She moved with a quiet confidence, a natural compassion, as if helping someone in need was simply part of who she was. Daniel had spent years surrounded by people who acted out of self-interest, who measured every gesture in terms of gain or loss. Seeing Emily act purely from the heart made him pause and, for the first time in a long while, question his own assumptions about humanity. He didn't approach her immediately. Instead, he watched from afar, noticing every detail: the gentle way she spoke to the boy, the small smile she gave him, and how she returned to her work without seeking acknowledgement. There was a kind of grace in her actions that couldn't be taught or bought. It was natural, effortless, and deeply human. Daniel felt a pang of envy for that simplicity, realizing that, despite all his wealth and power, he had long forgotten the value of small, selfless acts. As he continued to observe, he noticed how other customers were oblivious to the scene outside. They were focused on their own conversations, their own meals, their own worlds. Yet Emily had made a difference, even if it was invisible to everyone else. Daniel admired that about her: her quiet courage to do what was right, even when no one was watching. He thought about how rare it was to encounter someone who acted with integrity without expecting anything in return. In his life, most gestures were calculated, most kindnesses were strategic, and most generosity came with strings attached. Emily's simplicity and honesty struck him like a revelation. He found himself studying her as she moved around the diner, taking orders, wiping tables, and managing the chaos with practiced efficiency. She worked long hours, yet she never seemed frustrated or bitter. Her eyes held a spark of resilience, and her voice carried a warmth that made even the most tired customer feel seen. Daniel wondered what her life must be like outside the diner, what challenges she faced, and how someone with so little could give so much. There was something extraordinary about her, and he knew that ordinary compliments or polite gestures would never capture it. He needed to understand her world, to see the person behind the apron and the tired smiles. The boy outside finished his meal and lingered for a moment, looking up at Emily with gratitude in his eyes. Daniel watched Emily's subtle reaction: a slight nod, a small smile, acknowledging the boy without making a scene. It was effortless and genuine, the kind of kindness that could change someone's life in a single moment. Daniel felt a deep respect for her, a feeling that was new and unfamiliar to him. He realized that true character could not be measured by wealth, success, or status. It was revealed in the smallest of actions, in moments that went unnoticed by the world. For Daniel, this observation stirred something long buried. He had spent decades building his empire, amassing wealth, and gaining influence. Yet he often felt isolated and disconnected from real human connection. Seeing Emily reminded him of the simplicity of genuine compassion, and it made him question the purpose of his own success. He thought about how many people he had passed by in life without noticing, how many moments of opportunity for kindness he had missed because he was too busy pursuing power or avoiding risk. Emily's actions, though small and humble, shone like a beacon in his mind. A reminder of the impact one person could have without expecting anything in return. He decided not to approach her immediately. He wanted to observe more, to understand her fully before intervening. He noticed the way she handled difficult customers with patience, the way she offered encouragement to her coworkers, and even the small moments when she paused to make sure the diner stayed clean and welcoming. Every detail revealed a depth of character and a strength of spirit that Daniel found rare and inspiring. He felt a growing curiosity about her life, her struggles, and her motivations. She seemed to carry the weight of the world lightly, and yet with dignity and grace. As the evening wore on, Daniel continued to watch Emily from his corner, noticing how she never complained, how she treated every person with respect, and how she maintained her compassion even when life seemed harsh. He realized that her actions were not motivated by recognition, reward, or obligation. They were an expression of her true self. This realization struck Daniel deeply. He had spent his life measuring people by what they could offer him, by what they could achieve, or by the way they fit into his world of business and wealth. Emily, however, measured herself by a different standard, one that valued kindness, integrity, and the simple act of helping another human being. The scene left a lasting impression on him. Daniel understood that he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that could not be replicated or manufactured. He knew he could not let this moment pass without consequence, that Emily's quiet courage deserved recognition, but not in the way most people might expect. He wanted to find a way to honor her integrity, to reward her character, and to give her opportunities that matched the depth of her heart. Yet he also knew that approaching her too soon could disrupt the authenticity of her actions, that the very charm of her kindness lay in its selflessness. As Emily continued her shift, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would learn more about her, understand her world, and find a way to make a meaningful difference in her life. But he would wait, observing carefully, ensuring that whatever intervention he planned would honor her spirit rather than overshadow it. In that quiet diner, amid the chatter of customers and the clatter of dishes, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into something life-changing for both Emily and the boy she had helped. Daniel left the diner that night with a renewed sense of purpose, his mind occupied not with numbers and deals, but with the extraordinary power of genuine, selfless kindness. Even as he returned to his world of boardrooms and business ventures, the image of Emily handing the boy his meal stayed with him. It reminded him that wealth and power were fleeting, but acts of compassion could leave a lasting mark on the world. He realized that sometimes the most profound lessons came from the simplest gestures, from ordinary people performing extraordinary acts without expecting recognition. That evening, Daniel learned that watching kindness unfold could be as inspiring and as powerful. Creating it himself, and he was determined to ensure that Emily's life would not go unnoticed or unappreciated. Emily returned to her life with the same determination she always carried, yet the events of that cold evening stayed with her more than she expected. Feeding the boy had been a simple act, something her heart demanded in that moment, but it quickly reminded her of the many struggles she still faced daily. Life didn't pause for kindness, and she was about to be tested in ways that would challenge both her resilience and her faith. In humanity, work at the diner continued to be demanding. Emily's manager, a stern woman named Carla, had little patience for what she called unnecessary gestures. Carla believed the diner ran on efficiency, rules, and strict profit margins, and she didn't understand why Emily would give food away for free. One busy afternoon, after Emily had quietly given another small meal to the boy when he returned, Carla confronted her in the back room. "Emily, I know you think you're helping, but this has to stop. You can't just give food away. We're not a charity. If it happens again, you'll be putting your job at risk." Emily listened quietly, nodding, but inside she felt a tug of conflict. She understood the rules, she truly did. But the thought of turning away a hungry child felt impossible that day. Emily went home feeling the weight of both the world and her conscience. Her small apartment was neat but cramped, with bills stacked in corners and a fridge mostly empty. She sat down on the edge of her bed, exhausted from the long hours on her feet, and thought about the boy. He had no one, no warm home, no security, and yet his small acts of gratitude had touched her in ways that her busy, stressful life rarely allowed. She realized that while she struggled to make ends meet, there were others who struggled even more. And though it was risky to keep helping him, she couldn't ignore the pull of her compassion. The boy started appearing more frequently. Some days he lingered outside the diner for hours, sometimes refusing to come in when Emily called him, shy or wary of attention. Emily began noticing subtle signs of hardship: dirty clothes, small cuts on his hands, a quiet weariness beyond his years. It became impossible to ignore that he needed more than a meal. He needed safety, stability, and care. Emily couldn't offer all of that herself, but she could provide moments of relief, small doses of hope. Each time she did, she felt a mixture of joy and worry. Her co-workers noticed the boy too. But unlike Emily, most were indifferent. Some joked about him, some complained about the extra mess, and a few quietly admired Emily's courage. She felt isolated in her choice, knowing that doing the right thing often meant standing alone. Yet in these moments, she found a strange strength. Helping someone in need reminded her why she persisted despite exhaustion, despite bills, despite the constant challenges. It reminded her that life was more than survival. It was about humanity, connection, and the small gestures that could ripple far beyond what anyone could see. Despite her determination, life had a way of testing Emily further. One day, she received an urgent notice from her landlord demanding overdue rent, threatening eviction if she didn't pay immediately. At the same time, her shifts at the diner were cut slightly, reducing her income when she needed it most. Her personal struggle was becoming heavier, and yet her sense of duty to the boy grew stronger. She found herself juggling unpaid bills, reduced hours, and the growing need of a child who had no one else. Many would have given up, but Emily could not. Her heart refused to let her. One rainy evening, the boy appeared outside the diner, shivering and soaked. Emily rushed to gather a warm coat from the lost hand-found closet and a fresh plate of food. She handed them to him with a smile, ignoring the warnings in her mind about consequences or Carla's likely anger. The boy's eyes lit up with genuine gratitude, and for a moment, Emily forgot the stress pressing down on her life. She realized that in this small act, she was giving him more than just food. She was giving him dignity, warmth, and hope, things money could not buy. The rain poured around them, but the small bubble of kindness between them seemed to hold its own light, shielding them from the harshness of the world. But Emily's actions did not go unnoticed by everyone. Carla, frustrated and tired of rule-breaking, issued a formal warning, and there were whispers from other staff members who disapproved. Emily felt the sting of conflict, torn between obeying authority and following her conscience. It weighed on her heavily, yet she refused to let it diminish her spirit. She began planning small ways to support the boy without drawing too much attention, leaving food discreetly, saving small amounts from tips, and quietly checking in on him. She was careful but unwavering, determined to do what she knew was right. Meanwhile, the boy began to trust her. Slowly, he opened up in small ways: a shy smile, a whispered "thank you," and occasional stories of the streets he navigated alone. Emily learned that he had no family, no safe home, and had been fending for himself for months. His resilience and quiet courage impressed her, but it also broke her heart. She knew she couldn't save him entirely, couldn't solve all his problems. Yet she felt a responsibility to make his life a little easier, even if only in small, meaningful ways. During these days of struggle, Daniel Carter continued to watch from a distance. Though Emily was unaware of his presence, he quietly observed her handling the daily hardships of her life, while still giving her time and energy to help someone less fortunate. He noted how she balanced her own needs with compassion for others, how she endured setbacks without bitterness, and how her character shone through, despite exhaustion and hardship. To Daniel, Emily was a rare example of humanity that refused to be compromised, a living lesson in integrity and in integrity. Selflessness that left him increasingly intrigued and determined to intervene, but only when the timing felt right. Emily's. The story of struggle and kindness created a delicate tension in her life. Every act of generosity carried a risk, yet her conscience demanded that she act. She began noticing subtle changes in herself, small moments of courage she hadn't recognized before, a deeper empathy for the people around her, and an inner strength that allowed her to keep going despite the obstacles. She discovered that even when life seemed unfair, when bills and responsibilities pressed heavily, moments of selflessness could provide clarity and purpose. Each time she helped the boy, she reminded herself that the world, though often harsh, still contained sparks of light worth nurturing. One evening, as Emily closed the diner after a long day, she saw the boy sitting quietly on the curb, looking cold and tired. She knelt beside him, wrapped him in the coat she had brought, and handed him the warm food she had prepared. He looked up at her, eyes wide with trust and gratitude, and whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Emily's heart ached and swelled at the same time. In that moment, she realized the profound impact of her small gestures. Despite her own challenges, she was making a real difference in someone's life. And that realization, bittersweet as it was, gave her strength to continue, to face the next day with determination, and to act with courage even when no one was watching. Through this ongoing struggle, Emily began to understand that life's tests were not meant to break her, but to shape her character. She learned patience, resilience, and the power of quiet, selfless action. The small boy, hungry and alone, became a mirror reflecting her own values back to Hertha: importance of kindness, cadre, and courage in the face of adversity. And though she could not foresee what the future would bring, Emily held on to the belief that even the smallest gestures could ripple outward, changing lives in ways she could never imagine. The diner was quiet that afternoon, with only a few customers scattered among the tables. Emily moved between them with the same care she always showed, wiping spills, taking orders, and ensuring that everyone felt attended to. Even when exhaustion tugged at her muscles, her mind, however, was partly elsewhere, thinking about the boy who had returned yet again that morning. He had looked more tired than usual, his small shoulders hunched against the weight of his invisible burdens. Emily felt a pang of worry and a fierce urge to help. Even though she knew her own life was still full of struggles, Daniel Carter sat at his usual corner table, watching Emily without drawing attention. Today, however, he did not intend to simply observe. He had spent weeks studying her, watching how she treated customers, how she interacted with her coworkers, and most importantly, how she treated the boy who had no one else. He had seen her patience, her selflessness, and her quiet strength, and he knew that he had to act. Not as a billionaire handing out charity, but as someone who genuinely wanted to honor her character and her choices. He had waited, carefully timing his intervention, because he understood that rushing in too soon could disrupt the authenticity of her actions. As Emily handed a plate of food to the boy and smiled gently at him, Daniel finally decided it was the right moment. He waited until she had returned to her station before approaching, keeping his tone calm and unassuming. "Excuse me," he said, his voice polite but firm. Emily looked up, surprised by the stranger speaking to her. His presence was calm, composed, and entirely different from the busy customers she was used to handling. "I wanted to ask you a few questions," he continued. "About you. About the choices you make here." Emily blinked, a little wary, but curious. Most people didn't take the time to ask her about herself, and even fewer seemed genuinely interested. "Okay," she said cautiously, her hands still resting on the counter. "What do you want to know?" Daniel smiled, a small measured gesture. "Why you help him," he said, nodding toward the boy outside who was quietly eating the meal she had given him. "Why you go out of your way when it could cost you trouble at work or risk your own comfort. Why you keep giving even when life seems to weigh heavily on you." Emily felt a mix of emotion, surprise, humility, and a touch of skepticism. People often asked about her kindness, but usually in judgment or disbelief, as if they couldn't understand why someone would act without expecting anything in return. "I don't know," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. "I guess I know what it feels like to be in need. I know what it feels like to be hungry or alone. I can't help everyone, but I can help him. And I don't expect anything back. I just want to do what's right." Her voice was quiet but steady, reflecting the sincerity behind her actions. Daniel listened intently, noting the honesty and integrity in every word. This was not someone performing good deeds for recognition or reward. This was someone whose heart demanded action, no matter the consequences. He realized that Emily's strength was rare, and it was exactly the kind of character he respected deeply. He wanted to ensure that her efforts and her courage would be recognized in a way that was meaningful. Not flashy, not superficial, but transformative. Over the next few days, Daniel returned, observing quietly at first. Then, gradually interacting more openly with Emily, he learned about her struggles, her long shifts, the mounting bills, the uncertainty of living paycheck to paycheck, and he admired how she carried herself with dignity, despite it all. He asked questions about her dreams, her aspirations, and her fears, always careful not to pressure her or disrupt her routine. Emily answered honestly, unaware of his true identity or his influence. And in those conversations, a connection began to form. Daniel saw in her a rare combination of resilience, compassion, and humility, qualities that could not be taught or bought. Then, one afternoon, he decided to reveal a part of himself, carefully and deliberately. He invited Emily to sit down with him for a private conversation, framing it as a discussion about life and opportunity. "I've been watching you," he began gently, "and I have to say, your actions have left a strong impression on me. The way you help others, the way you care, without expecting anything in return, it's remarkable. It's rare, and I want to help you, if you'll allow it." Emily stared at him, disbelief flashing across her face. She had never been offered anything so significant, so unexpected in her life. Her natural instinct was cautioned, a quiet warning that perhaps it was too good to be true. "Help me," she repeated softly, her voice trembling slightly. I don't understand." "Why?" Daniel smiled, sensing her skepticism, but undeterred. "Because the world needs people like you," he said. "People who act with integrity, who show kindness without expecting a reward. You've reminded me, and I hope you realize this, that true value is not in wealth, status, or power, but in character. I want to offer you opportunities, resources, and support, not to change who you are, but to ensure your life and your potential are not limited by circumstances beyond your control." Emily was silent for a long moment, trying to process the enormity of what he was saying. She had lived a life defined by struggle and self-reliance, and yet here was someone offering her a chance to break free from the constant pressure of survival. Her first thought was of the boy. She wanted to help him too, and wondered how she could extend her new opportunity to benefit him as well. She realized that Daniel's offer was not just about money or influence. It was about opening doors she never imagined could exist. The conversation continued, flowing naturally yet deeply, as Daniel shared stories of his own experiences and observations, carefully building a bridge of trust. Emily listened, cautious but increasingly intrigued, beginning to see a path that could transform not just her life, but the lives of others she cared about. The boy outside remained unaware of the meeting, yet he was at the heart of the discussion, a symbol of why kindness mattered and why Emily's actions were so profoundly important. By the end of their talk, Emily understood that this was not a fleeting gesture or a momentary act of generosity. Daniel was offering her a life-changing opportunity, grounded in respect for her values, her independence, and her integrity. It was a chance to pursue stability, growth, and purpose, while still remaining true to the person she had always been. For the first time in years, Emily felt a mixture of hope and possibility, emotions that had long been buried beneath exhaustion and worry as she walked home that evening. Her mind raced with thoughts and possibilities. She thought about the boy, about her own struggles, and about the surprising turn her life had just taken. The world suddenly felt both vast and intimate, filled with unknown opportunities, but still rooted in the small acts of courage and compassion that defined her daily life. Emily realized that the decisions she made, the choices to act with kindness even in difficult circumstances, had led her to this moment, an extraordinary intersection of chance, character, and timing that would forever alter her path. And in the quiet moments that night, as she reflected on everything that had happened, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that life could change in unexpected ways, often sparked by the simplest of actions, and that the integrity she had shown in feeding a hungry boy could now ripple outward in ways she never imagined. Daniel's approach was not the end of her journey. it was the beginning of a new chapter, one in which her kindness, resilience, and courage would be recognized and supported, allowing her to make an even greater difference in the lives of others. Emily's life had begun to shift in ways she could never have imagined. After her conversation with Daniel Carter, she returned to the diner with a quiet excitement that she tried to keep hidden beneath her usual calm demeanor. Her coworkers noticed a subtle change in her the way she moved with a lighter step, small smiles that lingered a little longer, and the spark in her eyes that spoke of hope and possibility. Emily herself felt a mixture of awe, nervousness, and cautious optimism. She knew that the opportunities Daniel offered could change everything, but she also knew that her heart and her values would guide. She accepted this new chapter. The first step Daniel suggested was practical. He wanted to ensure that Emily would have stability, the kind she had never been able to rely on. He arranged for her rent and bills to be taken care of, providing her with breathing room she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she could walk into her apartment and not feel the crushing weight of overdue notices. Her mind felt clearer, and a sense of calm settled over her that she hadn't realized she was missing. She could now focus on what truly mattered, helping others, pursuing her dreams, and making decisions that aligned with her values rather than her fears. But the opportunity extended far beyond financial support. Daniel offered to connect Emily with education and training programs, leadership workshops, and even a mentorship role in his charitable foundation. The foundation focused on helping homeless children and families, an area Emily had become deeply passionate about through her experiences with the boy she had been feeding. At first, she hesitated. Emily had never considered herself someone who could step into a position of responsibility in such a large organization. She had spent so long focused on survival that thinking about influence, leadership, or long-term impact seemed almost foreign. But Daniel encouraged her gently, reminding her that her knowledge, compassion, and first-hand experience were invaluable. She began to see herself in a new light, not just as a struggling waitress, but as someone capable of making a broader difference in the world. Meanwhile, the boy she had been helping began to experience changes in his life as well. With Daniel's guidance and Emily's persistent support, they found a safe shelter where he could stay temporarily. For the first time, he had a warm bed, clean clothes, and meals he could count on. Emily visited him regularly, bringing small comforts and ensuring he felt seen and cared for. She helped him enroll in school, advocating quietly but firmly for his right to an education and a safe environment. The boy's shy smiles gradually turned into confident laughter, and his trust in Emily grew stronger with each visit. She realized that her actions, which had started as small gestures of kindness, were now creating a tangible, lasting impact on someone's life. As Emily became more involved with the foundation, she discovered a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Her daily struggles were no longer just about survival. They became opportunities to learn, grow, and contribute. She shared her experiences openly, speaking to other volunteers, staff, and children about resilience, empathy, and the power of small acts of kindness. People listened to her, drawn not by wealth or authority, but by the authenticity of her story. She had earned a new kind of respect, one rooted in character and lived experience, and she felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that her journey could inspire others to act with compassion as well. Emily's life began to expand in ways she had never expected. Daniel introduced her to networks of people who valued service and integrity, people who shared her vision of creating meaningful change. She attended workshops on social programs, learned strategies to help at-risk youth, and began planning initiatives that combined her lived experience with the foundation's resources. Every step she took was guided by the same heart that had driven her to feed a hungry boy in a cold diner months earlier. She never forgot the simple act that started it all, and she made sure that humility and empathy remained at the center of her work. Despite the growing responsibilities and new opportunities, Emily remained grounded in the values that had carried her through her toughest days. She continued to visit the boy, check on others in need in her community, and carry herself with the same quiet grace and compassion that had first caught Daniel's attention. She realized that change didn't require abandoning who she was. Rather, it required amplifying her strengths and using them to impact the world more broadly. Each act of kindness she performed now had the potential to inspire and empower many more, creating a ripple effect she could never have imagined from that first simple gesture. Emily also developed a new relationship with Daniel, one based on mutual respect and trust rather than power or hierarchy. He valued her insights, her honesty, and her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. In turn, she appreciated his guidance, encouragement, and careful support. Together, they discussed strategies for helping children in need, for creating programs that could reach more people, and for ensuring that the Foundation's work remained grounded in empathy and integrity. Daniel's presence was never overbearing. It was supportive, allowing Emily to take ownership of her growth and the impact she could make. Through all of this, Emily learned to embrace both the opportunities and the responsibilities that came with her new circumstances. She discovered that life-changing moments often begin with small acts of courage and compassion, and that one's character could shape the direction of a life more profoundly than circumstances ever could. Feeding the boy had been a quiet act, unnoticed by most, but it had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just her life but his, and ultimately the lives of many others through the work she began to lead. In quiet moments, Emily reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the cold evenings at the diner, the long hours on her feet, and the countless small sacrifices she had made without recognition. She realized that those challenges had prepared her for the opportunities now opening before her. Her struggles had given her empathy. Her perseverance had given her strength. Her courage had given her influence. And through it all, she remained humble, never forgetting the small beginnings that had made everything possible. The boy, now smiling more confidently and thriving in school, became a living reminder of the impact that one selfless act could have. Emily understood that her role was not just about providing resources, but about offering hope, guidance, and belief in the possibility of a better life. She continued to mentor him, encouraging his dreams and helping him navigate the challenges of growing up without a family. Through their relationship, she saw the tangible result of her compassion, the real difference that one person's kindness could make in another's life. As the days turned into months, Emily's influence grew, but she never lost the simple, authentic heart that had defined her from the beginning. She knew that success was not measured by wealth or fame, but by the lives she touched and the values she upheld. Her story became one of inspiration, demonstrating that even in the face of hardship, integrity and kindness could open doors, create opportunities, and change lives in ways that were profound and lasting. By the time Emily fully settled into her new role, she understood a truth that had been quietly revealed to her from the very beginning: the smallest acts, when performed with a pure heart, could ripple outward and transform more than she could ever imagine. The hot meal she had given to a hungry boy months ago was no longer just a simple gesture. It was the catalyst for a journey that brought hope, purpose, and lasting change into her life and the lives of those she touched. Through courage, kindness, and resilience, Emily had not only changed her own life, but had become a source of inspiration and light for others, proving that selflessness could indeed create miracles in the real world.